February 12th, 1988. The dining staff aboard this cruise liner are making final preparations ahead of tonight's gala dinner service. For one couple, tonight's dinner also marks the end of a very special occasion. As 26-year-old Ashely and new husband Charlie celebrate the last night of their honeymoon cruise to Costa Rica. But unfortunately for the new couple, their happily ever after is about to be cut tragically short. Because later that evening, Ashely disappears. What happened to Ashely? Is it a terrible accident? Or is it a conspiracy by secret government agents to commit murder? How did she end up dead? It's day one of the latest voyage of this cruise ship. At an incredible 635 feet long, with many first-class amenities, this ship is one of the most beautiful vessels in the world, taking guests from California down the Pacific coast to Costa Rica. But unfortunately, for new bride Ashely, this week-long cruise through paradise will be the last trip of her life. Ashely is celebrating her honeymoon with new husband Charlie, along with over 2,500 guests, crew members, and staff. But could one of them be responsible for her disappearance? Ashely grew up in Louisiana and is described by her friends as a kind-hearted and soft-spoken young woman. But despite her mild-mannered attitude, years of modern dance, ballet, and intense physical fitness training have sculpted her petite 5'4" frame into that of a strong, flexible athlete.
I think since she was a little girl, she loved fitness. She started out actually with ballet, and she went into fitness classes simply because she was a very shy girl, and she wanted to bolster her confidence.
After graduating from massage therapy training in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Ashely starts her career as a massage therapist, taking a position at a Louisiana country club. And it's here, in June of 1988, that Ashely meets Charlie. Charlie was born in Boston. He meets Ashely as a client first, going in for some treatment after falling down some stairs. Ashely is immediately attracted to her handsome, muscular client, who works as a chiropractor in New Mexico.
He's on her turf, but they're both single, they're both young, they're both attractive. It's a perfect opportunity for something to happen.
Ashely and Charlie quickly realize they have a lot in common, including both of them being passionate about physical fitness. For Charlie, his fall down the stairs means that falling in love has a whole new meaning. On February 4th, Ashely and Charlie drive his red convertible to Las Vegas and marry in a small civil ceremony.
Well, Ashely was still very young when she decided to marry Charlie, and we were a little wanting her to take more time. But after a 9-month whirlwind romance, her heart was set, so what could we say?
2 days later, the Gerbers board a cruise ship and start their 7-day honeymoon cruise to Costa Rica. They're the perfect all-American couple. Beautiful and successful, they even take the time to exercise throughout the week. Guests sit in their lounge chairs and watch them go through their exercise routine. This couple seems destined for a happy life together. But at dinner on February 12th, guests notice some tension between the picture-perfect couple.
On the last night of the honeymoon, Charlie still wants everything to be perfect. He still wants them to keep to their perfect eating and fitness routine. Whereas his wife is a little more, hey, let's live a little. It's our last night of our honeymoon.
Charlie also isn't happy about Ashely's appetite for desserts.
And that's when there starts to be problems.
Charlie's outburst gets the attention of the other guests, including some of the dining staff, causing Ashely to run out of the dining room with tears in her eyes. As Charlie chases after Ashely, he gets into another argument with a woman on the deck of the boat. When Charlie catches up with Ashely in their honeymoon cabin, the lovers' quarrel doesn't last long.
When couples first get together, there's that sort of honeymoon phase, and that may dissolve quickly when small differences in their personalities start to show through.
So it's the last night of their honeymoon cruise, and they decide, let's blow off some tension, let's reconnect to the thing that bonds us and go for a late night run on the track.
Eventually, Charlie stops to catch his breath. But Ashely decides she wants to get in a few more laps. But unfortunately for Ashely, this last lap will be the last time anyone sees her alive. Later that night, Charlie bursts into the captain's quarters with horrific news. His wife has gone overboard. Ashely and Charlie seem to be the perfect all-American couple. After a whirlwind romance and marriage, the pair have set sail on a cruise ship to enjoy a week-long honeymoon voyage down the Pacific coast.
My husband and I felt that she would do things spontaneously, and even getting married was one of those things.
But But after an argument in the dining hall, Charlie can't help but notice the other guests watching them, especially his beautiful wife, Ashely. But after a late-night jog on the last night of their cruise, Ashely disappears. Is it possible there's a killer on board? At 3 a.m. on February the 13th, the cruise ship's captain is interviewing a frantic Charlie, who says that his wife, Ashely, has gone overboard. The ship's crew use flashlights to search for Ashely in the water. He's running gear and out of breath. But the captain also notices Charlie has injuries on his face.
We're investigating a potential homicide. So when one of the parties involved shows up with wounds to their face, scratches, cuts, it can indicate that there was some sort of struggle, some sort of physical altercation that resulted in those injuries.
But before the captain can ask how Ashely went overboard, Charlie asks to use the restroom. When Charlie goes into the restroom, the captain can see him checking out and washing his face.
It's certainly unusual that you would want to clean a scratch on your face before anything else.
Now with his face cleaned up, Charlie is ready to explain how Ashely went overboard. Charlie tells the captain that the two of them had gone for a late-night run around the ship. But then, tragically, Charlie says that the wind starts to pick up and get stronger. So strong that it pushes Ashely over the edge of the ship. She tries her best to hang on, but the ocean winds are too much, sending her plummeting into the ocean below. Next, the captain asks about the cuts on Charlie's face. Charlie says that when he heard Ashely's screams, he tried to save her. But the winds were too strong and sent him flying into a wall, causing him to hit his face on a control box.
Well, when you're on a cruise ship, you're still at the mercy of elements. Flash storms, high winds, violent waves. If the winds got high enough and strong enough, someone might have been blown overboard.
Unfortunately, despite an exhaustive search, the crew can't locate Ashely's body in the water. Which means, unless there's any witnesses, the last person to see Ashely alive was Charlie. But while there's no evidence of any foul play, the captain can't help but feel like Charlie's story isn't adding up.
There's holes in Charlie's story, though. The captain looks at the weather that night, and the wind speeds were only 5 miles an hour. That's nowhere near enough to blow someone overboard. Seas were fairly calm. They weren't that rough that night. So already there's some suspicion building about this guy's story.
All of this makes the captain wonder if there's more to Charlie's story.
In this particular case, the winds were only reported to be in the range of 5 miles an hour, which is barely enough to, ruffle your hair.
Is it possible that someone else could have murdered Ashely and Charlie covered it up? After the captain calls to notify police and the Coast Guard of the ship's overboard situation, he calls in the ship's medical officer, Dr. Price. to examine Charlie's injuries, which proved to be superficial. But then, the captain informs Charlie that the doctor is also deputized as a law officer and would like to interview Charlie officially to take down the details of what happened.
If this ship is at sea, the captain would need to deputize somebody or would have a security officer on board who would be responsible for looking after serious incidents like this.
Charlie is willing to be cooperative and agrees to let the doctor record their conversations and answer his questions as best as he can.
Timelines are incredibly important when we're talking about any serious crime, particularly homicide. Everything leading up to that event needs to be documented, needs to be questioned. Who was involved, who was around, where did things take place, and what happened immediately after it.
While Charlie sits across from the doctor to give his statement, the Coast Guard begins their search for Ashely's body. The question the doctor wants to answer is if it's possible that Ashely's death was more than just a freak accident. His investigation will take him all over the ship, forcing him to ask a terrifying question. Is it possible that the ship has a murderer on board? All eyes are on the fitness-inspired Ashely and Charlie, who are celebrating their honeymoon with a 7-day voyage down the Pacific coast on a beautiful cruise ship. But as the cruise winds down, some people have noticed the once happy couple aren't so happy. But after a late-night running session ends with Ashely going overboard, husband Charlie is forced to sit down with the ship's medical doctor and a deputized law officer to explain what happened. Charlie says he's willing to be fully cooperative and answer any questions the doctor might have. He also gives Dr. Price permission to keep the cabin door open and to record audio of their discussion. Charlie tells his version of what happened earlier that morning. He sticks to his original story of how Ashely was out for a late-night jog, only to be blown overboard by strong winds. But as the captain noted earlier, the wind speeds at the time were only around 5 miles per hour. That wouldn't be enough to blow any full-grown adult over the railings, which are 3 foot 6 inches high, especially someone with Ashely's athletic background. The doctor isn't buying Charlie's story, but with no evidence of his involvement in a potential murder, he places Charlie in an unoccupied cabin under protective guard while he continues his investigation. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard continues searching the open waters for Ashely's body. Then, as the ship continues to its destination, the doctor and the captain get a lead from one of their passengers. The man turns out to be an off-duty police officer and has found what appears to be one of Ashely's earrings, embedded in the running track near where she went overboard. What's more, he's also found a few strands of Ashely's hair stuck to the running track.
Protections need to be put in place to preserve whatever evidence may be there to show whether it's a crime or not. So everything needs to be treated as a homicide right from the beginning until you learn it's not.
With this new evidence showing signs of a possible struggle, the doctor decides to try and verify Charlie's claim that the scratches on his face were from hitting a control box during his attempt to save Ashely. But upon further inspection, the doctor can't find any of Charlie's blood, hair, or other marks on the control box. In fact, it appears to have no sharp edges at all, which makes the doctor wonder if Charlie could be lying about the source of his injuries.
So one of the biggest challenges faced by the investigators in this case was there was no other witnesses. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone else was asleep, so they only have Charlie's word about what happened to Ashely. No one else saw what was happening. They were all fast asleep in their cabins.
The doctor decides instead to question some of the guests to see if they saw anything suspicious between Ashely and Charlie during their trip and before Ashley's disappearance.
But there was something people witnessed. There was conflict on that last night, and everyone around them witnessed a fight at the dinner table that night. So we do have that. We do have that there was some friction between them the night she died. And there are witnesses who saw that and could talk about it. And there was also another argument, an altercation that Charlie had with a female passenger that evening as well. So that could show where his mood was that night. Maybe he was already really angry about something or just a bit off that day.
With his less than stellar alibi, combined with the witness testimony, the doctor is starting to wonder if Charlie himself could be responsible for his wife's disappearance. But why would what looked like an innocent argument send a husband to potentially murder his new wife on their honeymoon? But then, Dr. Price gets a surprise visit from another passenger, Rachel, who claims to have witnessed Ashely being followed by a man the night of her disappearance.
But as it turns out, Charlie's not the only strange man on board that day. There's another fellow. A woman named Rachel comes forward and tells the police that she was approached by a man that gave her the creeps the first day on the cruise.
This strange man pressures Rachel into accepting a drink from him, but she refuses.
When she managed to blow him off and get away, who does he hit on but Ashely? This guy's really memorable too. He's so sunburned that Rachel describes him as looking like a bright red tomato. So one thing Rachel observes is that the sunburn guy is almost stalking Ashely during her time on the cruise ship, which is weird. Makes Rachel really glad she didn't accept that drink.
Unfortunately, Rachel doesn't know the man's last name, but says the doctor will be able to recognize him because of his sunburn. The doctor thanks Rachel for the new information and adds Eric to his list of possible suspects. This makes 2 people who would have seen Ashely after she left the dining hall. But with still no witnesses for the moment she went overboard, Dr. Price can't help but wonder, what if someone else is responsible for Ashley's disappearance? Suddenly, after hours of searching, the Coast Guard has tragically found Ashley's body. What's more, they've confirmed this case is a cold-blooded murder, which means the killer is still on board. Ashely and Charlie are celebrating their honeymoon with a 7-day voyage on a beautiful cruise ship. But some of their daily exercise routines have caught the eyes of some other passengers. But during a late-night running session, Ashely is mysteriously thrown overboard, resulting in one of her earrings and strands of hair being found on the ship's deck. Ashely's husband, Charlie, tells the ship's doctor, the de facto investigator, that his wife lost her balance after heavy winds blew her over the edge. But the doctor knows that the winds were only 5 miles per hour that night, which aren't strong enough to move a grown woman. Meanwhile, another witness claims to have allegedly seen Ashely being followed by a sunburned van the night she went missing. Then, after nearly 10 hours of searching, the Coast Guard spots Ashely's body.
So even though the ocean is huge and vast, luckily Ashely's clothes kept enough air inside that her body stayed buoyant, and the Coast Guard was able to discover her.
For police, this is a sign that Ashely was either unconscious or already dead when she landed in the water. As the medical examiner inspects Ashely's body, they find multiple examples of physical injuries sustained before she was dumped overboard.
There's something about knowing that your daughter is never coming back. Then there's knowing that she's been found.
The medical examiner finds a goose egg-type bump on Ashely's forehead, suggesting she was hit with either a fist or a blunt object. They also find marks on her neck, along with signs of hemorrhaging in her neck and eyes, which all point to manual strangulation. Ashely's clothing also contained material from the jogging track on the deck, which means she was being pressed down with considerable force, potentially from someone on top of her.
What would bruising around a person's neck indicate in a medical examiner's report? It would tell me it was a homicide.
With confirmation from the medical examiner, Dr. Price and staff aboard can officially confirm they have a murderer on board. The questions now are, who killed Ashely and why?
I can't even imagine her not being in our life anymore.
So because Charlie's been kept in quarantine all this time, when the news breaks that this investigation has turned into a murder investigation and there's someone suspicious with his wife's death, he's in the dark. He has no idea.
With only a couple hours remaining before the cruise ship reaches its final destination for police to take over, the doctor decides it's time to question his second suspect, Eric, the sunburned man, who was spotted following Ashely the night of her murder. Eric is a Wisconsin-born accountant who tells the doctor that he decided to take a cruise as a way to meet single women. But when the doctor confronts him about being spotted following Ashely around the ship, Eric denies it. When the doctor tells Eric that Ashely has been murdered and that he's a potential suspect, Eric immediately comes clean.
Eric, once he hears that he's a suspect, realizes that being embarrassed is way better than doing prison time. So he comes forward to the investigators and admits that, sure, he had a crush on Ashely and maybe he followed her around too much. He feels really badly about that, but he has an alibi. He had nothing to do with her murder.
Unfortunately for Eric, his attempt to romance the tearful newlywed doesn't go as planned.
It was embarrassing for Eric to admit that Ashely even got angry with how he was hovering over her and following her around. And once she told him to leave her alone, he did back off. He went to the bar that night, got stinking drunk, and then was in his berth throwing up for the rest of his night. And the brother heard and had to take care of him. So his brother can also verify his alibi.
While Dr. Price is happy to cross Eric off the list, he warns him against approaching any women for the remainder of the cruise, telling him to stay in his room and out of the sun. Which leaves only one remaining suspect.
When Ashely's body is examined by the medical examiner, they discover that she still has her engagement ring on, and its dimensions match the scratches on Charlie's face. So that's pretty damning evidence.
For the doctor, this final clue is the last piece of evidence he needs to confirm his suspicions. On February 15th, 1988, the ship reaches the port of Long Beach, California. Police are waiting to arrest Charlie for the murder of his wife, Ashely. He's held without bail until trial.
With such a strong case against him, Charlie seems destined for life in prison. But after only 3 days in jail, he comes to a sudden realization.
Charlie demands to speak with his lawyer. Charlie says he was framed for his wife's death, and what's more, he knows who did it. On the outside, Ashely and Charlie appear to be the perfect all-American couple, combining their 7-day honeymoon cruise with eye-catching exercise routines. Until tragically, the honeymoon is cut short when Ashely's body is found in the ocean after being strangled and dumped overboard. Charlie denies his involvement, but with strong evidence against him, and without a credible alibi, he's arrested for Ashely's murder. But after 3 days in jail, Charlie calls his lawyer with some startling new information. He says not only has he been framed for his wife's murder, he's figured out who did it and why.
There were these two suspicious-looking Ukrainian men that were on the ship at the same time as Charlie, and he's convinced that they're the ones responsible for his wife's murder.
Charlie tells his lawyer that he believes Ashely's murder traces back to a government conspiracy that began almost 11 years earlier.
In 1978, Charlie traveled to Ukraine with his parents to open a chiropractic clinic. This should be a new beginning for the family. It should be a wonderful time. But somehow, Charlie ended up in jail and a mental hospital for 2 months. While he's there, he's allegedly drugged and beaten because he refuses to marry a neighbor's niece. After he finally manages to get back to the US, he writes a book about his experiences and all the horror that happened to him there.
So one of the things that he said during the case was that the Ukraine government was after him.
So around the time the book is published, the police contact Charlie's parents with reports that someone has a plot to kidnap Charlie outside a shopping mall. Charlie claimed that two men grabbed him and said, "Ukraine is here to take you away." But somehow, Charlie manages to break free and escape, even shooting one of the would-be kidnappers as he makes his bid for freedom. He then runs to his car and drives away. Charlie's eventually quoted in a newspaper saying, "All of Ukraine took their best shot and they blew it." This is why he believes that the two men on the ship were actually Ukrainian government agents who were there to retaliate against him for writing this book, and that's why they murdered his wife.
According to Charlie, him and Ashely are exercising on the running track when his wife is viciously attacked by a stranger and his accomplice.
As a writer of fiction, I have a hard time with this story. It seems a little too good to be true. And this is such a great story, these Ukrainian government agents, perfect story. So why did Charlie first have that yarn about his wife being blown over the rail? Why not tell the truth from the beginning? But Charlie, of course, has a theory. Of course, he must have been drugged. That's why he thought he saw his wife blown over the edge. It was because he was drugged.
It's an incredible story, and if it's true, it'll all come out during Charlie's trial. The prosecution outlines a straightforward case against Charlie. First, by using the forensic evidence provided by the medical examiner, as well as testimony from the cruise ship crew and passengers, who witnessed the couple arguing. But Charlie maintains his innocence, resting his entire defense on the idea of him being framed by the Ukrainian passengers. But the prosecution surprises everyone when they bring one of the Ukrainian men to the stand.
It turns out there's only 2 Ukrainian people on this entire cruise ship, and one of them decides to testify to clear his name. He's not a secret agent. He's got no connection to the government. He's just a wedding photographer who was there for a vacation with his friend. The story of the photographers is definitely true. They were photographers just there to take a picture of a wedding, and it was a friend's wedding.
The prosecution closes their case by outlining exactly how they believe Charlie killed his wife, Ashely. It all starts with a bad argument over dinner. The couple tries to put it behind them. But during a late-night jog, Charlie's rage boils over. First, Charlie hits Ashely in the head, knocking her earring off, sending her crashing to the deck. Then he climbs on top of her and strangles her, pushing her down into the ship's deck and holding her until she's unconscious. Then, Charlie carries her body to the rail of the ship and tosses her overboard, while she's still unconscious. Her official cause of death is listed as drowning by way of manual strangulation.
Even with all the evidence against him, Charlie sticks with his Ukrainian story. He tells the jury that even though his story may seem contrived, these things do happen in the world of international intrigue.
Is it possible that Ashely's murder is part of a targeted Ukrainian government conspiracy? Or was Ashely's death nothing more than a tragic, cold-blooded murder? It will be up to the jury to decide. Charlie is on trial for the murder of his wife, Ashely. He's accused of murdering her on their honeymoon. The prosecution has a solid case, backed up by medical evidence and witness testimony. But Charlie says he's been framed for the murder. He claims that his wife's death is in fact a retaliation by the Ukrainian government for a book he wrote about them a year earlier. With both arguments presented, all that's left is for the jury to determine if they believe in Charlie's Ukrainian government retaliation killing theory, or that he's the murderer, willing to say whatever he can to stay out of jail.
So Charlie's got a big problem. His story's full of holes, and everything's just not adding up. There's so much against him. People saw him arguing with his wife the night she died. The forensic evidence, scratches on his face, the fact that there's signs that she was strangled. The alibi that the Ukrainians had, so they couldn't possibly be the ones that drugged him and threw his wife overboard. All of this is pointing to Charlie.
Charlie Gerber's espionage defense is not enough to sway the jury, who find him guilty of second-degree murder on the high seas.
In the end, the judge said he'd never seen a honeymoon that ended in such a chilling and heartless manner. He called Ashely's murder one of the cruelest crimes he'd ever seen.
Your daughter can never come back, but you do have closure in knowing that Charlie was arrested and convicted.
Charlie is sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of his wife, Ashely. It's a senseless and tragic end to what should have been a beautiful start to a beautiful life together.